I'm bringing to you placemaking. I see placemaking as composing and orchestrating, as strategically intervening in a perhaps neutral space to create moments of interest, to turn it into a place of discovery, a place of engagement. And if we talk about engagement, we might as well talk about ornament. Ornament, it is my contention that it can play an instrumental role in bringing meaning and bringing engagement into a particular place. Now, between less is more and less is a bore, placemaking is striving, is aspiring to that wisdom, the wisdom to make the difference. Is aspiring to identify those particular instances, those particular locations where something can happen, where more is welcome, where more is more. And like in a lot of things that we do, location is essential. And we're going to zoom in into one particular such place in this project, which is the elevator wall in an entrance lobby in a new hotel. A site that was identified by the design team, and before the design team, by the owner, as not only being a place where more is welcome, but where more is mandatory. Now, seeing that that is an elevator wall and interacting with the space after visiting, I saw this as an opportunity. I saw it as an invitation to use ornament, to see can ornament work as an architecturally integrated work of art. And what can it do if that is to happen there? Can it maybe visualize the movement of people, the movement of the machines behind that wall, and work with the enclosures that were designed for that, for the doors, and create this continuity, perhaps creating also a modern day version of those intricate cast iron enclosure that we so treasure when we go sightseeing in Chicago, for example. And turning them into something that is perceived on both walls. So you see, like I expanded my territory. I said, how about we use a canvas to include the upper floor where the reception for this hotel actually is. But you may ask, why ornament? We've been indoctrinated, most of us, to see ornament as something superfluous, as unnecessary elaboration. But practicing ornament and spending years studying it and engaging with it, practically marrying it, I discovered that ornament has a function or more. First of all, I think in my experience, ornament marks important thresholds, but it also reveals rhythms and movement, particularly appropriate for what this project seemed to talk about, and also connects us to each other and to the world. It connects us to that object that is ornamented and then through it to the world, which is also particularly relevant to this exercise. Now, by discerning and developing these cosmic harmonies out of diverging and diverse forces that we perceive in the world around us, and embedding them in objects and structures around us, things that we use or things that we encounter, we turn the ordinary into extraordinary. And we do this when we use ornament with this particular language. I strongly believe ornament works as a visual language. It has its own vocabulary and structures. It uses relatable elements, objects or items that one can either recognize directly from nature or that have symbolic meaning. But they're not randomly used. They're used in structured patterns, in like words in a verse, you know, in a meaningful combination that has its own rules. And these systems become integrated with the object that they ornament, morphing in that sense to follow the form and the function of the container, of the object that will receive it. I think ornament as a language works because it answers an inborn need to make sense of the world. We have the ability to recognize patterns. We see them and we understand them. So I can say we read them. We read them, we adopt them, and then we transcribe them. We put them in these condensed versions all around us and translate perhaps cycles and changes that happen at a very large scale into things that are perceivable at a human scale. And I'm showing you here an example of such a transformation from a literally outline of the human body in a ceremonial event in Australian rituals to a pattern derived of very stylized human beings that connect an individual to their immediate family, in this case identified as the parents and the children, and then a completely abstracted and distilled version of geometric forms, what is called the shadow system. And these are patterns of continuity, patterns that anthropologists call genealogical patterns, because they talk about our perception, the reality and the longing of the individual as belonging to a continuity in space, which is moved in the horizontal direction by connecting one to their co-present, I say, family, the people that happen at one time in one place, but also in the vertical dimension, a continuity in time with generations that came before and the generations that would come after. And as you can see here, these are actually drawn from things that happen all over the world and have happened throughout human history and prehistory. And I use these as my geometric underpinnings for the design because I think it fits so perfectly with how the hotel sees itself. The hotel, being a very new chain of hotels, imagines itself as a network of destinations in all over the continents, but also places where people do feel that they are connected to each other, and also that they are connected with the local histories and stories of the places where they happen to visit. And you can see here in the geometric layout what it is called a decorative field, the grid onto which the ornamental elements have to be deployed in creating the final object. And naturally, looking at visualizing the movement, they claim the territory right above the elevator enclosure. And as the architect had designed these frames in front of the wall, so they go around the entrance in the elevator, but they're set a couple inches away from the wall, and they were supposed to be clad in a metallic veneer. The first spot I wanted to grab was just above that, and I wanted to make these screens and clad them all in the same material and create a true enclosure for the whole height of the space, and discover that there is only that much integration that an architect can accommodate, or maybe the insurance agent. We were directed away from that idea and encouraged to preserve that feeling of continuity while really not touching in any way the frames. And you also can see here the recognizable trope. We picked the keyhole as the thing to bring meaning into the place. And that comes from a very early decision to incorporate the key in the stories of the place. The key as triggering memories of maybe old travels when one goes to a hotel in, maybe they can still do that in Europe, and you see behind the counter these nicely nested keys and the room numbers in the cubbies on the wall, and then thinking of unlocking opportunities and possibilities. So in a sense, the key was embraced unanimously by the design team, and then everybody got enchanted with these globes, which are made by old keys collected and assembled by hand by these Australian craftsmen. And we were planning to use them in front of the elevators. You can imagine it's an 18-foot tall space, which is taller than this, where these globes would hang, and thus would create a dialogue with the panels and start to trigger both recognition and a sense of belonging. Now you see here how we try to develop them in a way that will allow us to make them, assemble them, and install them in the spots so that they can fit right behind those frames. And that was a very limited depth, a couple inches there. What I'd like you to look at here too is that the composition of these keyholes, which played as a figure ground and as voids and solids, is not the same across the patterns. That had been an important part of this design, is to create a dynamic composition over the whole set. However, a big part of making this, while we knew we were going to cut it either by laser or by water jet, was to incorporate the hand making, like George said. Can this also have a human touch? And that turned out to be both the challenge and also what triggered the actual making of this. And working with a very skilled and experienced and willing laser cutter, we developed this system in which the cutting was done in a way that was repetitive, but gave us these pieces to work with that we could then manipulate by hand. And my team arranged and experimented with to create a final composition and check and see that it captures what we really wanted it to do. And using symmetry operations and rotating and moving these in what I call structure variation. But also finding the right laser that would allow us to etch the surface for added interest, so that as one comes closer to them, one has another level of discovery. And in the last step, experimenting and working with color and finishes that we could apply by hand, such as metallic waxes, that brought a sense of materiality and of mass, of volume. And you can see here how they work together to create a very complex and intricate layering, and the use of the fasteners that both have a visual interest, but also preserve that ability to connect and disconnect, to assemble, disassemble, so that things can get transported and then installed. And here is after the first moves were made, place them in the location. This is the upper floor, and you start to see how the finishes pick up the reflection of the lights and work with the context and the surroundings to create that environment. And with the key globes that are perceivable as one goes over the steps to the second floor. And here, notice how the accent colors pick up on the colors of this huge map made of mosses, and appear to scatter across, I've escaped from that landscape and scatter across the panels. And I think this brings here not only that sense of memory and that sense of exploration, but it does give an encounter with something that aspires to capture the complexity of life. And one might say that, that is really not a basic need. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need shelter. And incidentally, those are things that a hotel willingly offers to everybody. But it is my strong belief that if we may have all those, then that may not be enough. If we do not relate to the environments in which we are, if we don't relate to each other, I think we really are not complete. I do have this passion, this thing that kindles my love for ornament, and it is this belief I mentioned, that it is an inborn human need, and it is what makes us understand and see reason and order in the world, and capture it and make it visible and inscribe it and turn it into truths that anchor us and place us in the world. Just think of Notre Dame. And with that notion, as you move into the world, I encourage you to pay attention, to look for it, to see where you might encounter it, to see how it makes you feel. And as you design and build and invest in the built environment, I encourage you to consider it. You may discover that it brings joy and life, that it brings a moment of pause, but it may also bring a sense of meaning. If you get the opportunity, I really strongly encourage you, if you have not tried already, to try it. You, like me, may discover and embrace the ornamenter within. Thank you.